straight from the underground arts collective community building perspective. And in fact, I think that is where I see a big meaning for games. I've seen it happen a little already in New York, but we're not even close. But what I've seen is that art is often a meaningful voice for lots of people that otherwise, it's a reasonable and meaningful voice to participate in a city conversation. So the ambition's a little smaller. It's like your Bushwick conversation, your downtown Brooklyn conversation. But your friends come out to see your work at the very beginning, and they're friends, and whatever, like there's a scene that kind of can emerge out of really strong artwork, and that turns into a community really fast in the right conditions, and that turns into a movement if lots of people start to pay attention. And that's kind of where I see social impact games, just because that's where I've seen social impact art in New York.
Let's try to open up game making to more diverse communities, people with different kinds of educational backgrounds, different perspectives, different genders, and that to me is going to be kind of make or break the future of social impact games. I mean, this is a very diverse audience. Typically at a game conference, I'm speaking to about 1,000 men, primarily white men, and there are maybe 10 women sort of peppered throughout the space. So it really is a very different gender dynamic, especially at the big game conferences. But that's changing, and hopefully that can continue to diversify and change.
Diversity will also help lead to kind of social impact games that are more nuanced and impactful in their messaging, because in the past, we've seen games that are addressing social issues, but they're so just, kind of like brick over the head with it. Like, yes, poverty is bad because of X, Y, and Z, and like, this is how you can fix poverty. And then you see something like Papers, Please, where it's about immigration, and it doesn't really take one stance one way or the other, but you see both sides. You're like, oh my God, this is really difficult, and I'm really torn about what to do with this one person who's standing in front of me.
Mainichi is a game by Maddie Bryce. I think it's one of her first games. She's actually known as a writer about games and a sort of critic of games. But Mainichi is meant to, was a game that she made for a friend of hers who couldn't understand her experience as a trans woman walking the streets and how that felt. So, I think it's really interesting how games are now just a methodology to sort of describe how something is experienced. And I think experience is really the key word here. It's not about knowledge or learning facts. It's really about experiencing something on a visceral, sort of emotional level.
Something that we're starting to see more of is the personal stories that Colleen mentioned from independent developers. I think since game making tools are getting more accessible, more people are making their own stories.
There are education programs for games. There is software, and there is the ability for lots of people to participate in making games. Now that doesn't work on its own, but that is a big piece of reflecting diverse and meaningful values throughout the game, like medium. But those games need access to assembly, to press, to, they need a space to actually they need a public voice. There needs to be diversity and ownership of all the distribution of video games, which could be any channel we could think of. It could be new channels. But we need to figure that out, actually, as a cultural prerogative.